Governance is all about, in our case, we do have a central data organization. So it's more about alignment with the business and the technology teams, especially the risk team. I think it's very, very critical. Data and risk go hand in hand because we're a bank, we deal with all sorts of data. And if I have to break down what governance policies and procedures really mean, there are a few attributes towards it. First and foremost is clear roles and responsibility, accountability of what that central data team does and what the lines of business do, and what's the target operating model with which they both operate. I think that's critical for success. Coupled with that is geographical considerations. It's very, very important, customer data in one geography versus other, because we are in global. And how tightly coupled we are with AI and other visualization tools. I think Ian just said, data as a product. How are employees, lines of business, product owners able to visualize and use the data from the central repository? It's about value addition. Third-party data is a big, big factor. How do you bring in third-party data, and how do you run analytics on that? How do you adapt to the future? Everybody's talking digital first, information security, technological advancements of data, what's critical versus what's not critical. So that nomenclature is important. And lastly, there are 3 layers of defense in the bank from a risk perspective. One is the actual teams who are dealing with data day in, day out. People need to get educated about what kind of data they are using. Then the next level is the central data under the CDO. They have data stewards and champions who make sure that the data is understood well. People are using the data for the intended purpose. And the third layer is the external auditors, because at no point we need to have a data breach. So the operating model, Jeff and team, in terms of what it is, it's a complex governance structure with multiple layers. But the key to that is how well it is aligned with the lines of business goals and the employees or the people who are working who understand the data.
First and foremost is always making sure that we meet our legislative obligations. So we have PHIPAA here in Ontario that we need to ensure from a privacy security type perspective. Where is the value of data and analytics within the healthcare system, and then what needs to be wrapped around that from a people, process, and then ultimately a technology perspective, including governance structures to enable that sort of data democratization. I think for a long time, things like others have spoken of, things have lied within certain silos. And so really it's about trying to establish how we can kind of bridge, not necessarily break down the silos, but bridge those silos so that data can become more accessible, both for quality improvement perspectives. Ultimately, it would be lovely if we could, start implementing AI models and those sorts of things that help with like active decision support at the bedside. I think we're a little bit removed from that. And then ultimately, the long-term planning, for the organization. So, from our perspective, it's really about enabling the use of data while still making sure that we're, meeting our legislative obligations.
I believe that, data is important to small and large, and so that's a good segue. Being large, obviously data is an imperative, because ultimately as an organization like Manulife, what is actually provided to the various stakeholders needs to be reliable. There's really no forgiveness for not being right or accurate. So I think if you kind of start from there, governance is really that layer that ensures that what you deliver to your stakeholders is in fact trusted and there's confidence in what is being provided. And those silos emerge because it's just too big to try to bring all of it together to a common denominator. So I think the enterprise data lake being one of the primary objectives is really trying to define those common denominators to bring together, for example, all of our assets, and being able to report on those assets as something that is unified. And I think from there, then each of the vertical businesses, such as real estate and mortgages, has its own governance piece that starts with, if I can kind of talk about it in three layers. You basically look at it from a data ownership perspective, and that data ownership or stewardship really ensures that there's the proper definitions and everyone is in agreement on those definitions and what they mean, so that when they actually, you know, bubble up to the consolidation layer, it's aligned. And then of course there's the kind of the leadership piece, where leadership is involved and helps to mandate how data is actually defined, captured, and used, because ultimately that also decides on the confidence and trust of the foundation. So you've got the data ownership from a, you know, critical business perspective, because not all data is going to be shared. And then having that strategy aligned with, you know, the leadership that mandates that. And then of course there's the way in which it actually gets consumed. So there's the visualization piece of it. So that's the way I would define where we're at.
But reality today is, you know, the ubiquitousness of 5G, IoT sensors everywhere, the bedsides and places that we don't normally see them. Data is just simply growing at such an astronomical rate. And in fact, you know, recent studies suggest that rather than making progress, many firms were actually falling behind meeting their data goals and keeping up. Here at Hitachi, we've, you know, passed the zettabyte mark, and many of your organizations, I think, are also probably reaching untenable levels. How do you continue to wrap your arms around the data and protect what's sensitive? Especially with all the threat actors today. We talked about data breaches and astronomical fines for regulatory compliance associated to them. I would actually argue that I don't think you can any longer rely on measures of trust but verify of yesterday. And in my perspective, I think the most critical software and systems for governance today must now take proactive measures for systems and software to do data masking at the sources, application changes to only generate data that you truly do need, and methods like pseudo-anonymization, where the context of sensitive data is kept for data scientists by generalizing the data to still be of value while reducing the risk. And if you can do that and kind of break down the firewalls inside of it, so you don't have such a very large perimeter, or, you know, the Cadbury cream egg where it's hard on the outside, soft and gooey on the inside, you can actually open up access to a lot more of that data for your data scientists and inform your decisions, kind of building on that new governance framework.
When we embarked on the transformation journey, I think the thought process that I put forward to the board and to the CEO is we needed a multi-layered approach to ensure data is secure. And as part of that, we looked at the existing infrastructure. We looked at DR, where the data is at store. We looked at the production data of how we would protect it from things like ransomware. And even look at, you know, as we move to and become a larger consumer of SaaS-based products, how would we do DLP, which is data loss protection, and CASB as well. So I guess in my view, I was looking at it more as a holistic view of data at rest and data at flight and data in flight as well. And as Ian outlined or mentioned, you know, identity management and PAM will also become key to protecting the data and how it's kind of stored. With respect to that, we have just implemented the storage platform, which encrypts data at rest, which enables you to implement, you know, sensitive data that you can actually secure. In addition to that, I would say the other aspects that what we're looking at is truly driving a data classification matrix, and then you would drive in your data retention policies for that as well. So we'll be working in doing a workshop on building a data catalog and then the storage as well as part of that. And then the last piece where I looked at, which was specifically in the space of workplace as well. So we didn't just look at data from the rest, but in flight as to leveraging Microsoft Office advanced threat protection as well. And how do you filter emails and malware and viruses and everything like that to truly try to get you to a, you know, a robust zero-day protection from that perspective. But so far, I would have to say is that pieces of it is done. I think as we continue to go on the journey, I think data classification and CASB is going to be the top of mind for 2021 projects.